A very good noon and Jai Hind, dear students. Yesterday I have already sent you a video telling you about the theme of the chapter The Enemy, written by Pearl S. Buck. In my video I have mentioned about the message, the theme, all the characters, the setup. Today we are going to have a deep explanation of this chapter. Now, let's begin. Before you read, it is the time of the World War. An American prisoner of war is washed ashore in a dying state and is found at the doorstep of a Japanese doctor. Should he save him as a doctor or hand him over to the army as a patriot? So that was the conflict, dear student, which was taking place in Dr. Sadao's mind continuously. So as I told you, the story is set during the Second World War. A Japanese doctor finds an American prisoner of war at his doorstep. He is in a dilemma that being a doctor, should he save the wounded man? Or being a Japanese, should he hand over the enemy to the army? Before I proceed, let me quickly tell you about Pearl S. Buck. Pearl S. Buck, she was born in the year 1892 and she passed away in the year 1973. She was an American writer and novelist. She had a Chinese name, Sai Zhenzu, as she spent her childhood in China, being the daughter of missionaries. She was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 1932 and the Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1938. Now let's start with the explanation and reading of the chapter. Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot off the Japanese coast where as a little boy he had often played. The low square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. Trees. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pines, supporting himself on his bare feet, as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. His father had taken him often to the islands of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side, "Those islands yonder, they are the stepping stones to the future of Japan. Where shall we step from them?" Sadao had asked seriously. "Who knows?" his father had answered. "Who can limit our future? It depends on what we make it." So dear students, difficult word, yonder. Yonder means at some distance in the direction pointed at. Okay? Now what has happened in the first page? Let's see. The writer introduces the main character of the story here, Dr. Sadao Hoki. Dr. Sadao's house was situated on the coast of Japan. He had been living there since his childhood. The house had a low height and was made of stone. It was set upon the rocky beach, which had a boundary line made with pine trees. So उसके घर के पास किसकी boundary line थी? That was of pine trees that were tilted towards one side, and they were little bit bent, little bit tilted. When Dr. Sadao was a child, he would climb up the pine trees. On his visits to the South Seas, he would see men do so in order to get coconuts from the trees. So he had observed this thing when he used to move on the beach, that people, they used to climb coconut trees to get coconuts in the same pattern. He would accompany his father to the islands of the South Seas often. His father would point towards the islands and would say that those were the stepping stones towards the future of Japan. Dr. Sadao would question him childishly that where would they reach from those islands? His father would reply that it was not known, as it depended on the future. The future had no limits. It depended on mankind how it shaped its future. So his father was a very, you can say, a very serious kind of a personality. Now let's see. Sadao had taken this into his mind, as he did everything his father said. His father, who never joked or played with him. So from here you can make out that his father was quite serious. His father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. So Dr. Sadao was the only single child. He was the only child. Sadao knew that his education was his father's chief concern. For this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America to learn all that could he learn of surgery and medicine. He had come back at 30, and before his father died, he had seen Sadao become famous not only as a surgeon but as a scientist. Because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean, he had not been sent abroad with the troops. Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically, and for this possibility, Sadao was being kept in Japan. Now let's see what is happening in this paragraph. Sadao retained all the things that his father would tell him as a child. He has kept everything in his memory. His father never played or joked with him. They shared a mature relation, and his father underwent a lot of hardships to bring him up. Sadao knew that his father was concerned about his education. He was sent to America at the age of 22. He was sent at the age of 22 to study surgery and medicine. He returned at the age of 30. So that means after 8 years he came back. Before dying, Sadao's father saw Sadao become famous. So he saw his son becoming famous not only as a surgeon but also as a scientist. So Dr. Sadao was a doctor as well as a scientist. Sadao was on his way to discover a treatment for wounds which would make them absolutely clean. So he was doing a research on that. That is why scientist. So he was not sent abroad with the armed force as a doctor. As I told you, it was the story which was having a setup of Second World War. So that's the reason he was not sent with the armed forces to serve those army people who get injured during the war. Also, he was retained in Japan because the old general, we have already discussed in yesterday's video, there is another character, general. So old general was suffering from an ailment which needed to be operated upon in case of an emergency. Okay, So, till here we have come to know about his childhood, about his father, about his house. How was his house? Where was it located? What was his father used to say about those islands? And at what age Dr. Sadao was sent to America? 22. For how long he studied over there? 8 years. Then he came back at 30. And we have also come to know that Dr. Sadao's father is no more, because it's clearly mentioned here that before dying he had seen his son Dr. Sadao becoming famous as a doctor and also as a scientist. Okay, so this much we have covered till paragraph 2. Now let's move on to paragraph 3. Clouds were rising. Clouds were rising from the ocean now. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. Sadao watched mist-hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. Then he would go into the room where Hannah, his wife, would be waiting for him with the 2 children. So this paragraph is also talking about Sadao's family, about Sadao's house and its surroundings and the weather conditions. The writer describes the scene outside Dr. Sadao's house here. As the days were unusually warm and the sea waves were cold, the nights became foggy. It happens. It is a scientific fact. When the days are warm and in the night sea waves they get cold, the nights became foggy. Dr. Sadao saw the boundary of a nearby island became invisible gradually. जैसे जैसे fog होता जाता है तो the visibility becomes zero. Same was happening with Dr. Sadao as it got covered in the mist. Slowly, the mist is a kind of a fog only. Slowly, the mist, it has humid also, a little bit moisture also. Slowly, the mist was coming closer to him. To whom? To Dr. Sadao. Soon there would be mist all around his house. At that time, he would go back into the house to his wife, Hannah, and his wife's name was Hannah, who was waiting for him along with their 2 children. That means Dr. Sadao was having a complete family. He was having a happy family, a wife, Hannah, and 2 kids. Now let's move forward. But at this moment, the door opened and she looked out, a dark blue woolen Haori over her kimono. She came to him affectionately and put her arm through his as he stood, smiled, and said nothing. He had met Hannah in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure she was Japanese. His father would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah. And by what luck he had found her in the most casual way, by chance, literally at an American professor's house. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, and the students, though bored, had accepted this kindness. Sadao had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house that night. The rooms were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife so voluble, but he had gone there, and there he had found Hannah, a new student, and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. So, dear students, there are few technical terms used in this paragraph like howry. Howry is a loose outer garment worn over the kimono. You would have seen Japanese people, how shall I show you? Japanese people, how do they dress up? That is howry, a loose outer garment. And kimono is a traditional Japanese garment. Okay, kimono is a traditional Japanese garment. So, let's see. Before Sadao could go inside, he was almost about to go inside, but before he could go, the door opened and his wife looked out for him. She was wearing a dark blue color gown over her dress. She lovingly crossed her arms with his, smiled at him, remained silent, and stood by him. They had met in America. Sadao knew that his father would marry him to a Japanese girl only, and so he knew that my father will not accept any intercaste marriage because he was a kind of a patriot. So he knew that my father will not allow me to marry any other girl of any other country or nationality. So that's the reason he ensured this, that Hana is a Japanese girl, before falling in love with her. Dr. Sadao considered himself to be lucky to have accidentally met her at an American professor's house. He wondered that had he not met her, he would not have got a wife all his life. He thought that the professor and his wife were kind, as they were keen to help foreign students. In America, those professors, they used to help all the foreign students who used to come from other countries. He was glad that they had accepted this kindness and went to their house, because it was there that he had met Hana. Sadao would often tell Hana that it was a mere coincidence that he went to the professor's house that night, as the rooms in his house were small. वो जाना नहीं चाहता था, he doesn't want to go to professor's house, but coincidentally he went because there was this problem exist. And what was the problem in his house? That the rooms were small, the food was not good, and the professor's wife was very talkative. If he had not gone there that night, he would not have met Hana. At that time, Hana was a new student. Sadao had thought that he would love her if at all it would be possible for him. So till here we have seen the background, Dr. Sadao, the background of Dr. Sadao. He was from which family, he belonged to which family, where was his house situated, what was the dream and concern of his father, how about his family, how he met Hana, where he had studied. Okay, that much we have covered till here. Now let's move. Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him, even though they had been married years enough to have the 2 children. For they had not married heedlessly in America. Heedlessly means carelessly. They had finished their work at school and had come home to Japan, and when his father had seen her, means Hana, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way. Although Sadao and Hana had talked everything over beforehand, they were perfectly happy. She laid her cheek against his arm. So, dear students, though they met each other in America, they knew each other before, but they were not in a hurry. They did not marry immediately in America itself. No, they waited. They respected their families. A lot, and that's the reason they had waited for a long time, and they got married in Japan after coming home, and with the consent of everybody, with the consent of their family. Sadao and Hana loved each other even after having 2 children. After many years of marriage, still they were sharing a very good bonding. Their love for each other was not reduced a bit. They had not married in a haste in America, as I told you. Rather, they returned to Japan, sought permission from their parents, and then got married in a traditional Japanese ceremony. They had discussed all the details before the wedding, and they were perfectly happy with each other. Hana rested her cheek against Sadao's arm with affection. Now see, it was at this moment that both of them saw something black come out of the mist. It was a man. He was flung up out of the ocean. Flung, it seemed, to his feet by a breaker. He staggered a few steps, his body outlined against the mist, his arms above his head. Then the curled mist hid him again. And here, from this paragraph, dear students, the entry of that American prisoner has started. Like, he has entered the scene now. Okay, staggered means walk unsteadily, as if about to fall. That is known as staggered. Now see, that moment when they were so affectionately standing with each other, that moment they saw a figure appear out of the mist. What did they see far away? That a figure is appearing out of that mist. It appeared black in color due to the mist in the air. The outline of a man's body was visible in the mist. Outline, he was not completely visible, okay, because it was mist, as I told you, fog everywhere, so the visibility was not very clear. He walked unsteadily. He was as if he is about to fall, so he was walking in that pattern with his arms above the head. It was an indication that he was a prisoner. His arms were above the head. That means he was a prisoner. You would have seen na prisoner कैसे मतलब whenever anybody found guilty, how has done a crime or he was sent behind the bars, we simply say na hands up. So that way. The man walked a few steps and then disappeared in the mist. So he walked few steps and then he disappeared, that man. Now let's see. Who is that? Hana cried. She dropped Sadao's arm and they both leaned over the railing of the veranda. They were standing in the balcony outside. There was a railing, so they leaned upon the railing to have a clear look. Now they saw him again. The man was on his hands and knees crawling. Then they saw him fall on his face and lie there. Leaned means bent forward. So what happened? Upon seeing the figure, Hana reacted by asking that, who was that? She took her arm out of Sadao's arm and both of them bent forward over the railing of the veranda to have a closer look at the man. They saw him again. He was crawling on his hands and knees, literally crawling. Then he fell on his face and kept on lying there. Probably he had fainted. So till here we have covered today, dear students. Here this we are going to cover because it's a whole new paragraph. So this we are going to cover in the next video. Read this chapter and it's really very interesting. I'll catch you up in my next video. Till then, take very good care of yourself, stay healthy and stay happy. Have a very great day. Bye bye.